I'm Kelli Richards, and you're watching Real Visionaries. Hi, I'm Kelli Richards. This is Real Visionaries, and my guest today is Jay Rosenzweig. Thanks for joining us, Jay.
It's my pleasure. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you. What we're doing in this series is having conversations with innovators like yourself, who are also entrepreneurs who have reinvented themselves. They often have some tie with social impact. Most of them have something to do with music. So you kind of check all the boxes, which is why I really wanted to have you sit down with us.
Fantastic.
Tell us a little bit about your background, but include in it, if you would, highlights about how your money situation shaped your worldview, maybe even influenced the career trajectory that you ultimately took, which we'll get into.
Absolutely. So I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
Born and raised in Montreal.
Okay.
And Jewish background. We grew up in a neighborhood called Ville Saint-Laurent. And my dad was an electrical contractor. He was a tremendous entrepreneur. He began this business at the age of 20, I believe. He, at the age of 19, was building switchboards, circuit boards for battleships during the war.
Fascinating.
And worked for a year at a large electrical contracting business thereafter, and immediately started his own company called Utica Electric. There was nothing fancy or wasteful about the way that he ran his business. He actually built an office out of a part of our garage in the basement. And for better or for worse, entrepreneurship was in my blood from day one. That was a major topic of discussion. Business was a major topic of discussion, always at our dinner table.
I look to you, when I look at everything you've done, I kind of stick this label on you as social entrepreneur, because you are so involved with activism and social impact. And I wonder if you can share what it means to you, all the global human rights causes you've done, and I want you to talk about some of them as well, if you would.
Absolutely. So the grounding that my parents gave me, always having an open home, never having an alarm, never having a lock on our door, people coming and going, and the real spirit of giving that my parents imbued in me was a big part, a foundational part of the things that inspired me moving forward. I've had many, many great mentors. I've been very lucky to have had mentors who have taught me the importance of giving. One in particular I met in law school. His name is Erwin Kotler. He's an international human rights champion, represented people like Nelson Mandela back in the day. He went on to become Canada's Attorney General and Minister of Justice, where he enacted all kinds of progressive laws. He freed more people who were wrongfully convicted in 1 year, more than any of the previous ministers combined. I think enacted the world's first same-sex marriage legislation, certainly was a pioneer in that area.
Sounds like quite a guy.
And if you fast forward to today, I'm the chair of his international human rights organization. It's called the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. And we are representing the Nelson Mandelas, if you will, of today. There's political prisoners, sadly, all around the world who were working very hard to try and secure freedom for, but also combating the global trend toward authoritarianism, protecting media freedoms, women's rights, of course, and really combating racism and hate and discrimination in all its forms wherever in the world it might be found. So that's one of the really important projects that I'm on. I'm also on the board of an organization called Black North. In the aftermath of the George Floyd tragedy, we've gotten hundreds of companies to sign a pledge to do better in terms of Black executives amongst their leadership ranks, and really working in all areas to reverse racial discrimination. So in my capacity as chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights and board member of Black North, I've actually tried to combine forces, and we released an important statement about the importance of police reform as an example.
Yes.
We released a statement in favor of combating anti-Semitism and anti-Black hate together in solidarity, because we feel that the high tide floats all boats and that we should all work together in common cause. A couple more that I'll mention just in passing, Shelley Tagilski's Pandemic of Love. She raised $60 million during the pandemic for those in need, was a CNN hero, and wrote columns in Time about the beautiful matches and learnings made between donors and donees. And
Yes.
When We Band Together is another one, helping refugees at one of the biggest refugee camps in the world in Lesbos, Greece, building shelter for them, wellness centers, sports centers, educational centers.
What are some of the initiatives you're most enthused about in your capacity as an environmentalist?
Full Cycle is a really interesting one. It's run by Ibrahim al-Husseini. His parents were Palestinian refugees. He ultimately made his way into the United States, was given all kinds of opportunities through his own brilliance to invest in businesses like Uber and Tesla, and did very well, but his real passion is environmentalism. Full Cycle is a fund that he developed to buy companies whose mission it is to reverse climate change, and to invest in major projects whose mission it is to reverse climate change. So one of the businesses, for example, turns clean energy, turns waste rather into clean energy,
Yes.
And things of that nature. And it's a project that I really care a lot about.
And what is your involvement with that project?
So I'm on the advisory board
Okay.
of
Got
that
it.
organization, and it speaks really well and hopeful and presents a real hopeful message that a Canadian Jew and an American Palestinian can work together in
Oh
such
my
harmony.
goodness. And Jay, talk also about your annual Rosenzweig report on equality. And
As I mentioned, Professor Kotler
Yeah.
in Parliament did all these wonderful things as it relates to women's rights. And it got me thinking in 2006, I have a town strategy, leadership strategy, executive team building business. So in the business world, what's the status of women?
yeah.
And so it was 2006, and by law, and I think it's similar in the United States, all public companies have to disclose the compensation of their CEO, CFO, and roughly the next 3 or 4 or 5 most senior people in their
Correct.
organization. So I thought to look at the 100 largest publicly traded companies in Canada and basically look at their top paid executives. So the top 500 or so executives, and measure what percent were women. And I figured the numbers would be low, but I didn't realize how low they would be. The percentage was 4.6%.
Wow.
And I remember, at that moment in time, I determined that I must continue doing this project year after year to put a face to corporate Canada and the corporate world in general, with ironclad data. But also bring in influencers from all around the world to chime in on the report, provide endorsements and comments and quotes at the beginning of the report to amplify the discussion. So if you look at our 17th annual report, which we recently released, which also integrated NFT, the NFT world, we had Prime Minister Trudeau in our report, and Sheryl Sandberg and Elisa Milano, and Deepak Chopra and Van Jones.
Some real
and-
influencers there.
Yeah, people from really various walks of life, so that they can affect their followers to continue to keep this discussion at the forefront.
And what's the NFT piece that you've
So
woven
the
in?
NFT piece was, I decided to ask Boss Beauties, which is one of the big women-led NFT projects, led by Lisa Mayer, who's a phenomenal women's rights activist herself, and invite her to provide one of her pieces of art for the cover of our report this
Okay.
year. So we did that, and I highlighted the importance of Web3 moving forward, and the fact that it's an opportunity really to democratize and equalize all of us, through more of a community-oriented approach to the world.
How should companies be thinking differently, and what can they be doing differently in this realm?
It's not an easily answered question, but I could tell you from a recruiting point of view, we developed this white paper called Diversity Recruitment, and diversity recruitment is a sophisticated approach to filling roles from an executive standpoint. It's not about compromises. what very often happens with recruiters, whether they're internal recruiters or external recruiters for companies, is they'll rely on more of a titles-based approach to finding individuals. You need a CFO, go on LinkedIn, look for CFOs.
Correct.
You're in the manufacturing sector, look for manufacturing people who are CFOs. If 90% of the senior roles are held by men, and you're only looking at a titles-based approach, you're inevitably going to recycle more and more men.
Correct.
So it might be that you have a superstar woman who has a little bit of lesser title, by definition because they're also less paid, sadly.
Yes.
So you need to take a much more nuanced, sophisticated, deeper dive into finding the right talent if you want to be able to present a proper shortlist of candidates.
As individuals, as opposed to titles.
Spend time with that individual. You might be surprised what you
Well, and to your point,
end up
higher
finding.
touch with the person as opposed to pushing them through a system
Exactly.
where there's keywords being picked out.
Right.
you know?
That's disastrous.
Yeah. So I'm curious what you went through financially in your journey, and start there, and then talk about what the impacts were and how you had to modify your approach accordingly in order to balance your passions and your financial well-being.
I chose not to offer equity in my business to investors, which made it difficult in some ways. But I wanted to have the autonomy.
Of course.
Yeah. I'm lucky to have a family structure that's really supportive for me if I'm ever teetering on the edge here and there.
Yeah.
Which is really something that not everybody has, and I'm really grateful.
Have you teetered and had to rebalance somehow?
Yeah, the time that I most teetered probably was the 2008-ish time frame. Because if you're in the talent business and companies are going under and companies are contracting rather than expanding, you're out of luck.
Correct.
So there were there were 1 or 2 years where I didn't know if I was going to make it, but we hung in and we had enough projects that were able to keep things going. I never missed, giving an employee a paycheck.
Fabulous.
But it was difficult, and you had to go to the bathroom and splash water on your face and figure out, okay, how am I going to next meet payroll and things.
And
of
I
that
guess that
nature.
is the question: is what did you learn from those recessionary times? Even as we're looking at the potential of another recession now, some people say that you would apply and do differently.
Yeah.
So that you wouldn't ever be in that situation again, or could at least mitigate the risk.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd ever do things differently. Because every step was necessary, and I don't mean that on a spiritual level, but on a spiritual level too.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But every step was necessary
Yeah.
From a practical point of view as well. So I had over the years many beautiful offices, which means a lot of rent, and that means a lot of overhead. But these offices served me very well because they were in keeping with my high-end brand.
Yes.
Clients came through and were really impressed. I put my own personality, let's say, to these spaces.
Your own art on the walls, for example, or what have you.
I had, in fact, our main boardroom was kind of a marketing boardroom in a way, because all of the walls were covered with media coverage of the work we were doing and the work I was doing. So I noticed every time I would come into the boardroom while someone was waiting for me, they'd immediately be like looking through all of the
like a museum.
articles. Yeah. And, you can't necessarily put a price on the value of that, but I can almost guarantee that a lot of great relationships were eased more quickly.
Yes.
Because of, some of the appearances. That's the way life is. Like, unfortunately, appearance is important too.
Yeah, it is. It is indeed.
And, but, COVID hit.
Yeah.
And that hurt my business. So this is recent, right?
Yes.
That hurt my business quite a bit.
How so?
The first 3-4 months of the pandemic, companies were panicked.
Yeah.
They weren't hiring. The projects I was on were put on hold, ended up not coming back. And even wealthy, big multi-billion-dollar banks who I was in the middle of projects with,
Yes.
who could absolutely afford to continue, and they had these needs, their HR people were saying, we have to stop because how would it look in the marketplace that we're continuing business as usual when everyone else is suffering?
Keeping up appearances.
So it was really tough.
Yeah.
But eventually, businesses realize it's the new normal, and we have to move on with our lives and find ways to generate revenue, and the business came back.
Yes.
But a new phenomenon occurred. Zooms and online discussions, video discussions
And remote working.
became more and more acceptable. In line with that, my beautiful office space, which I had for 10 years, was up this past June. I'm thinking to myself, first of all, I never dreamed I would love working from home. But I guess I got that all out of my system the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
The fancy suit, going to the fancy office. Like, I thought I would hate it. I actually love it.
Yes.
I'm spending more time with my family. I'm having more time to exercise.
I think a lot of people feel that way.
And and I'm being more efficient and effective at work.
Yes.
So the lease is up. I'm like, let it go.
There goes the beautiful boardroom with the Mac.
And good riddance.
Yeah.
To your earlier point of what are some ways you can find to, from a financial standpoint, achieve even greater stability and less insecurity. Well, I just
mitigate your risk.
Mitigate my risk.
Continuity.
I wiped out a major expense.
I do want to touch on your role as an investor and an advisor a little more, because I want our viewers to understand what your mandate is, what you're looking at. What are you looking for in that contest, wearing that hat?
I'm just fascinated about the technologies moving forward. So I love entrepreneurs. I'm very, very curious. And I bring a bunch of things to the table because over the years I've been really fortunate to have been able to develop an incredible network of people from all walks of life, and insight and the ability to advise people on a personal and business level.
I think we're very similar that way. I would call you, people call me a super connector, I would call you one as well.
Yeah, yes. I think that's probably fair.
Yeah.
And I've got this talent strategy, executive team building, skill set and expertise.
Yes.
So if you combine all that, I'm really excited to bring the value to young founders. And so word got around that Jay's beginning to advise founders on scaling up their businesses from a talent strategy point of view, business development, fundraising, organizational, strategic, whatever it might be. And so I began getting all these opportunities to work with just incredible young founders.
Any sectors in particular? Do they align with the activism social impact?
Yeah. A lot of them are at the intersection, let's say, of profit and purpose.
Okay.
You know,
I like
Full
that.
Cycle might be an example. I mean, Ibrahim would be more mature than a young founder, of course. But all kinds of different areas, including diversity and the areas of, bringing more equality to our world. But also just the impact of technology generally. But it's really, it's financial services, it's healthcare, anything you might imagine, mobility, tech.
And I'm guessing climate change, climate related.
Yeah, there's a few VC firms that I'm a part of that, one of them is called Rebalance Capital, led by a wonderful guy named Josh Tannenbaum in New York. So we invest in businesses that are focused on mobility, ed tech, and fintech. And the criteria is there has to be an impact, a positive impact in terms of strategy on communities that have historically been disadvantaged.
Yes.
One example in terms of investing in women-led businesses is Jessie Draper here in LA.
Yes.
Runs a fund called Halogen Ventures. So I'm invested in that. And she, as you know, invests only in female-founded businesses. So Jessie's a great friend.
And she comes from a lineage of the VC family, the Draper family.
The best
I know
of the
Tim
best.
quite well.
Oh, there you go.
And his dad.
That's
and
right.
then her brother.
Yeah,
and
they say
it's all in the family.
her grandfather was like the godfather.
He was the first venture capitalist.
Yeah. So I love Jessie.
She comes by it honestly with her pedigree.
And by the way, I'm a very happy investor. The statistics show that women-led businesses actually outperform men businesses.
Yeah.
So beyond the moral imperative of equality, like there's a business case to be
And from
had.
a talent standpoint, what do you attribute that to?
I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that it's harder for women to break through. So,
So they
in
try
a sense,
harder?
in a sense, you have the best of the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe just women are smarter than men. I don't know.
It's a possibility. Possibility. So I wonder about your passions evolving over time. It feels pretty consistent to me. There's a through line of social impact and
Absolutely.
entrepreneurialism
Yeah.
throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Did you ever do anything out of financial need or desire that offset your passion? In other words, did you do things for money
Yeah. Yeah.
as the driver, more so than your passion?
Not really.
No.
Not really.
Doesn't sound like it.
What I would say is my core talent strategy business is my most stable source of cash flow.
Call it bread and butter.
It's my bread and butter.
Yeah.
So not every single project that I take on is the most exhilarating and exciting of projects, but that's what we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. As far as the potential of a recession coming on us, if you believe that's happening, are you doing anything different this time around to mitigate your risks professionally, personally? Anything you could share, tips with our viewers about that?
Well, for my core business, I've scaled it down.
Lower the overhead.
I lowered the overhead. I didn't only scale it down for financial reasons, but financial reasons is a good one. It's also because my clients more and more are coming to me wanting my help with very senior strategic opportunities.
Yes.
But it's also so that I don't have the crazy volume of projects,
Yeah.
which would potentially steer me away from having the holistic kind of life that I want to have. And by the way, that's for the benefit of my talent strategy clients too,
Of
because
course.
again, the network I'm building, the insight I'm able to offer
Yes.
them is very, very unique as compared to any run-of-the-mill recruiter.
I love the fact that you're putting your life focus first, your life priorities, and then the business fits in around it.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that more and more as a trend, and it's something I wholeheartedly embrace.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I really want to touch on your views on Web3.
Sure.
And what you're doing in this space.
Yeah.
As you started to talk about that earlier, what you've tried, what the results have been so far, and maybe where you're headed next.
Yeah, so Web3 is here
Yeah.
to stay. It's only a matter of when the broader world around us will adopt. Similar to when Web 1 came around, the information superhighway.
Exactly right.
Right? People thought it was kind of a cool thing. Yeah, you can find information. Not sure, how useful it'll be over the long term.
And some people sat on the sidelines and missed the big boom. And
Exactly.
Then
The
Web 2,
dot-com boom, and then Web 2.
social media, user-generated content.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and like, how's Facebook going to make
Yeah.
money? It's kind of a cool thing to post some pictures, But so now we're into Web 3. There's no question it's here to stay. It's potentially more powerful than Web 1 and Web 2 combined, which is mind-blowing.
It is.
And so naturally, because I had this reputation as someone who's an advisor to tech and high-tech founders in helping to scale their business, all these opportunities kept coming to me from a Web3, NFT space point of view.
Metaverse, blockchain,
Yeah.
crypto.
I happen to be relatively active as much as I can be, because given how busy I am in Clubhouse, so I kind of got in with a lot of the sort of in-crowd
Yes.
of the NFT
digerati,
people.
as it were, yes.
Yeah, so I got all these opportunities, and the position that I took was not to really focus, and I missed the boat because of that in the short term, not to really focus much on the individual JPEGs. And I don't mean that disparagingly, there's a lot to these JPEGs, including utility and some of these projects. I'm looking at the Bored Ape, they may be the future Disney. So I don't mean it in a disparaging way, but I took the philosophy that I'd rather invest in the infrastructure maybe buy an NFT or two,
Right.
but really invest in the infrastructure around the Web3 space so that it wouldn't necessarily matter which NFT project or JPEG project that you bet on. Similar to Web 1, right?
Yes.
Web 1, internet was a thing.
Yes.
Obviously, it
Yes.
became a big thing.
Yeah.
But like 3 companies survived from that era. You know, eBay, Amazon, Oracle, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I feel the same way about Web3. I feel that most of these projects are going to die off.
Yeah.
But I, again, invested in the infrastructure. So one example is CryptoSlam. So I was really lucky to get into CryptoSlam really, really early with a couple of very prominent investors whose names people would know of.
Yes.
And
Feel free naming them if you feel comfortable.
yeah, and well, Mark Cuban was kind enough to introduce me to the founder very early.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so he's in, and Ashton Kutcher and Guy
Yes.
Asiri. I was one of the few, I don't know if I was number 4 or 5, whatever, external investors. And that's a really great business in that it's tracking the data related to NFTs,
Yes.
real-time pricing, almost like the Bloomberg, if you will,
Yes.
of NFTs. So that's the kind of thing that I predict will be around for a very long time and only continue to increase in value. And it's another example of a business where I'm able to cross-pollinate the various buckets of activities that I'm in,
Yeah.
because I was able to, after investing, then be hired to find them their chief technology officer.
There you go.
And they liked our shortlist so much that they hired a VP engineering out of that. So right away, it paid off really, really well for me.
Yeah.
And now they're on to their Series A shortly, and they already did a subsequent round. And, you know, just a win-win all around for everybody. And those are the kinds
Indeed.
of things that I find really satisfying. So, you know, I'm on a project called One Of.
I know of it.
Quincy Jones back
Indeed.
project. So those guys are really good friends of mine. I've invested in previous businesses of theirs. We're going to be in Vegas this weekend for Grammy weekend. They did a partnership with the Grammys, like all these cool projects. I'm in really like 15 or 20 of them
Yes.
with some really great names similar to the ones that I mentioned who brought me in. That's the other play that I am enacting really with the Web3 spaces. I'm trying to look at projects where there are experienced business people behind the projects,
Yes.
invested in the projects, who've had a background of already scaling businesses many times over.
And have a history, a string of successes behind
Exactly.
them.
Even, you know, before we knew what an NFT was.
It does de-risk the
you know.
investment when you work with people like that.
So that's kind of the approach that I've taken,
Sure.
and I'm really, really excited about these projects.
How about people that aren't quite as immersed as heavily as you are, that are still maybe on the sidelines? What do you see if, in fact, there is some kind of recessionary direction? What do you anticipate, or what would you advise people that aren't as entrenched as you are about the space in the near term?
About the Web3 space?
About them getting in financially?
I would argue that they shouldn't get in. I don't think they should be caught up in the FOMO of, oh my God, there's this new project and that's derivative of these apes or these cats or
Right.
whatever it is.
Right.
I wouldn't get caught up in it. I think it's gambling. Yeah. As I say, like, I'm bullish on Web3.
What will be the time that it'll make sense for people to?
Yeah,
look
well,
for?
I mean, I've chosen and I've been grateful to have the opportunity to invest in infrastructure businesses
indeed.
around it. But I don't know. It would have to be a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
But if you ever are to invest in a project, my strong recommendation is look at who's behind the project.
Yes.
See if they have any track record.
Yes.
See if there are any prominent investors involved. If not, I'd stay away, no matter how beautiful the art might look like, unless you can afford to buy the art for the sake of the art.
Right.
But as an investment, I think it's pretty dicey still.
Sage advice.
Yeah.
I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Jay. It's been a terrific...
Good connecting. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise.